My friend, today I prepared a really cool free shred guitar course for you that will take you from the very important technical basics all the way to the really fast, flashy and exciting stuff. So get ready to learn how to play amazing sounding sections just like this. Here's the best part of this course. None of this is based on boring mechanical sounding exercises. I will only show you really cool sounding practical licks that you can actually use in a practical context, so feel free to steal all of them. That way you can actually apply what you learn here in a practical context and you don't just study some boring exercises. Just one important thing before we dive in. This free course I put together is just a very small preview of what awaits you inside my actual online guitar academy on patreon.com/bernd, because students over there have access to my premium 30-day guitar courses, like the 12 really amazing guitar technique courses. Those helped over 40,000 students with reaching their dream picking speed and technical goals on the instrument. But of course there are also 5 full music theory courses over there, and there are even 4 home recording courses. And if you're really serious about this beautiful instrument and you want to go one step beyond, there's even a personal coaching tier if you want my personal input and feedback on your technique and your progress or your practice routine. So just click the link below, patreon.com/bernd, see if there are some free slots available this month. I'd love to welcome you inside my online guitar academy, but for now enjoy this free course I put together for you. Let's shred. The term beginner shred licks might sound confusing at first because playing fast and shredding is not easy, but those licks and basic concepts helped me the most in the beginning when I started working on my alternate picking and hand synchronization. So let's dive into it right now. Here's the first lick I want to show you. As always, you can find the tabs, guitar profiles and practice backing tracks in different tempos for each lick on my Patreon page, patreon.com/bernd. I upload these really helpful files for every single YouTube lesson that I publish, and I'm also in direct coaching contact with all of my patrons via email. So for the first lick we just work with one super basic concept, just 3 notes. Played in triplets, so A, B, C, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then we move this pattern through the scale. In our case, I chose the E minor or G major scale for all of this week's licks. So we take all notes of the very popular C major or A minor scale, but we need to raise F to F sharp. So it starts to sound much more interesting when I move this basic pattern through the scale on just one string. The main reason why I chose this lick in the beginning is because we're just working with one string here, so we don't have to worry about any string transitions. As you probably know, it's very difficult to switch between the different strings when you're performing fast alternate picking, and as a beginner you should focus on one challenge at a time. So before you work with really big exercises and challenging licks over multiple strings, it's always a good idea to keep it simple and to just focus on one string and on perfect hand synchronization. So 2 quick things before we move on to the next lick. When you're done practicing the basic concept in one position and start moving it through the scale, you want to focus on getting rid of any transitioning noise. So you don't want it to sound like that. It needs to be played in time, and the listener shouldn't actually be able to hear when you're switching to the next position within the scale. That will get much harder as soon as you speed it up, since you have to move between the different positions, but when you focus on that you will develop a great and super clean technique, and licks like that will sound even more impressive because of how accurately you can pull them off. And the second thing that will help you a bit with your timing is thinking in groups of 6 and not in groups of 3. When you think in groups of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, it might be a bit challenging that the accent of the second group, the first note, is an upstroke and not a downstroke. So when I play it slowly, we have an upstroke right here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it might be a bit hard to lock in with the metronome when you're playing it fast, because you're switching concerning the accents to downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, and so on. So when you're playing fast, it might be hard to lock in with the click accurately, because you're probably used to having a downstroke on every pulse. So when you're thinking in groups of 6 and you're playing 16th note triplets, you get a downstroke on every quarter note. And that helps me with staying in time and not losing the pattern. It might end up sounding like that when I don't focus on playing to the click. I'm in time now, but now the picking strokes are not synchronized anymore with my left hand. So once again, the two main inputs: focus on clean transitions between every position, and focus on thinking in groups of 6 with your right hand to lock in with the click. Of course, you don't have to always accent the first note of every group, but in the beginning it will help you with staying in time. Let's move to the second lick now. So once again, we work with the same idea. We have one super basic lick that we make more interesting by moving it through the scale later on. This time we are building on the foundation we formed with the first example by adding an additional challenge. We start working with string transitions. So now we have 3 notes on the D string and 1 note on the G string, and then we go back to the D string. Once again, we're still thinking in triplets, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. This is a super powerful building block that I'm using often for licks like that. So mastering this one will be very helpful in the future. So the first thing you need to master is not getting stuck between the D and G string when you're performing the upstroke on the G string. Now I'm stuck between the D and G string and I have to jump over the D string to continue with the downstroke. And of course that turns into a huge problem and messy sound as soon as we speed it up. So for this lick I prefer a picking angle like that. So the pick can escape from the strings, so to say, after I perform the upstroke on the G string. If I choose an angle like that, I'm stuck right now between the strings and I have to jump over the string to perform the downstroke. In contrast to that, with this angle, it feels pretty natural to be in the right position for the downstroke on the D string after the upstroke on the G string. As soon as you get a feeling for that, you can start moving this pattern through the scale like I did it in the practical example. And when you've spent enough time with this lick, you can speed it up in the future. And then you can also turn it around. But for now, let's get to the third and final example. So I hope that you start to see a pattern with those kind of licks. We always start with a super basic concept, a small lick that we move through the scale. First we started out by just playing on one string, then we introduced some challenge with a tiny string transition, and now we effectively work with 2 strings. That is the entire idea here, and then I move it through the scale. And so on. This is the most challenging lick concerning the string transitions, so please start with the first one. Here the same rules apply once again. I don't want the listener to hear the transitions between the different positions, and I don't want to get stuck with my pick between the different strings. So once again, I have an upstroke here on the G string followed by a downstroke on the D string. But then I have a downstroke here on the D string, followed by an upstroke on the G string. That is the entire section. So my picking angle when I'm playing this fast looks similar to the previous one. And I focus on making every single note audible and in time. So obviously hand synchronization is pretty much the most important topic right here. If you still struggle with that, please check out the video I posted a couple of weeks ago. So that's pretty much it for this lesson video. I think that those 3 licks serve as a great introduction to faster shred guitar playing. Please remember to start out slow and always work to a metronome with these licks. Remember that the fast takes that I played for you took many years of work on alternate picking, hand synchronization and many other topics, and by taking it slow and valuing accuracy and tightness over speed at the beginning, you will make the best results. Of course, you have to push your tempo later on to get a feeling for the fast picking, and for that I recommend short bursts of fast alternate picking mixed with slower note values that you can actually pull off already. If you want to make the most progress and get the full lesson experience, head over to my Patreon page right now and download all the files for this lesson. As I said, I uploaded the tabs, guitar profiles and also practice backing tracks in different tempos for each lick. Today I'd like to show you 6 really awesome essential licks based around the very popular natural minor scale. All of today's licks are based on individual and very interesting concepts. And yes, you're also allowed to steal them for your own music. So let's start shredding right away. So the first lick I'd like to show you today revolves around the B minor scale. It's quite short, but it features hammer-ons and pull-offs, hybrid picking and string skipping. So there's a lot going on in there, let's check it out in detail. So this lick is obviously based around a theme concerning the hammer-on and pull-off pattern across the B and the G string. We're starting out with a picked note, F sharp here on the 7th fret on the B string, and then hammer on to G, pull off, back to F sharp, so the first pattern is... And the second pattern is pretty much the exact opposite. We start with the higher note, E in that case, on the 9th fret on the G string, then pull off and then hammer on. So at first it's hammer on, pull off, and then pull off, hammer on. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It feels pretty logical to turn this into a lick in triplets. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And the reason why I'm working with hybrid picking right here, so with my middle finger aside from my pick, is because of the string skipping we have in there. So at one point we're jumping between the G and E string, and it's a pretty big jump. There's one string in between the B string and we don't want to touch that one, and it's a little bit easier to do that when you assign the pick to the G string and your middle finger to the high E string. And I'm also using my middle finger for the last notes, just to give that phrase a bit more attack and style. This is something I really like to experiment with. And one last detail that makes the transitions a bit easier with my picking is that I use an upstroke after every stroke with my middle finger. So I start out by down picking, then right here I already have my first upstroke, and then instead of down picking all the next notes, I'm using my middle finger. So let's listen to lick number 1 once again, played at the original tempo. The second lick I'd like to show you today is a bit longer and more melodic. This time we are working in the key of C minor, and we're starting with a really nice melody, bringing out those chord tones of the C minor chord. And the second half features some really cool alternate picking, so there's some shredding in there as well. By the way, and as always, you can download the tabs, guitar profiles and backing tracks for all of these licks on patreon.com/Bernd. I upload these really helpful files for every single video that I post here on YouTube. So if you want to make the most amount of guitar progress in the shortest amount of time with these videos, I highly suggest joining us over there in the shred guitar community. So for the first part of the second lick, I want to play a really cool melodic line that should remind you of this sound without even hearing the chord. Played in the background, that was a C minor chord. And to play a really cool melodic line right here, I want to avoid starting with the root of the chord or the perfect fifth. I want to pick some more interesting notes to make it stand out. So I'm starting my lick with a slide to the major second D before I go to the minor third E flat. So those are the first two notes on the 5th and 6th fret of the A string, and I'm sliding into the first one, into D. And then instead of just playing the next notes of the scale or even jumping into full shred mode right away, so I'm jumping to the G string instead, just briefly playing the root C, then immediately moving up to D once again, so I get this really cool sound. So essentially I'm adding the 9th and end up with this really cool sound over the C minor chord. And then I'm actually just working with this exact chord voicing or shape because I like it so much. You don't always just have to stick to using your favorite chord shapes as chords. You can also dissect them into single notes, of course, and turn them into arpeggios, and that's what I'm doing for the second half of the melody. So I'm basically thinking in this chord shape that I like a lot, and I'm playing the single notes right here. So the first melody phrase sounds something like that. And then for the second half, I'm introducing a really cool alternate picking theme in the C minor scale, just a basic shred lick. Maybe you can remember the groups of 7 we looked at when it comes to alternate picking exercises. So I'm playing odd note groupings actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that makes it a bit more interesting than just playing 3-note per string shapes up and down when you work with odd note groupings like that. So let's listen to the second lick in C minor in context once again. Please notice the 6-4 measure that moves into a 4-4 measure. That's also quite interesting. By the way, I know that I'm repeating myself, but I'm not making this up. Still around 70% of you guys and girls watching these videos are not subscribed to this channel yet. That is a pretty crazy statistic, and it also means that you keep missing a lot of videos. So if you're not subscribed and not a real part of this guitar community yet, make sure to change that right now. By subscribing today, you will stay on track from now on, and that will hopefully have a huge impact on your guitar progress. The third lick I'd like to show you today is based around the sweep picking technique and around the key of E minor. I basically started my sweep picking journey with those 3-string arpeggios. So this is a great starting point for you in case you want to start working with sweep picking licks in your music or in your improvised takes. Let's see how that one sounds like. So with this one we are not individually picking the strings like with the previous example with the alternate picking run. We're focusing on one connected fluid motion that is actually quite similar to arpeggiating a chord. So it's not that kind of approach where you're essentially picking the strings individually and have a motion like that. It's much more like smooth motion like that where you're arpeggiating a chord. And this is actually a great way of starting out with that, because it kind of feels like letting your pick fall, and gravity does most of the work right here, so you're not really pushing like that. It's a very small motion, and to start out with that you could just let the notes overlap in the beginning and play like that a little bit. That's the exact motion that you want to go for. And then, of course, the tricky part is separating those notes, so you don't want any overlapping notes right here. And one final detail, I'm not just hammering on those last notes of the arpeggio, I'm actually using an upstroke for these to kind of bring them out a little bit more. And I'm also trying to just use a little bit of rubato for those notes. It's a bit difficult because they move so fast. So I'm not just hammering on like that. Instead of that, I'm using an upstroke for the final note. So I'm only using downstrokes, but an upstroke for the final note. So that makes it a bit easier to really bring out those notes. And at the end, you're bending from F sharp to G and from D to E. Let's check out this really cool sweep picking arpeggio lick once again performed in the original tempo. Now we are switching to a different playing style once again for lick number 4. This one is based on the very fluid sound of hybrid picking and legato playing. So there's not a lot of picking going on in there. I'm mostly using my middle finger for this lick in A minor. So this one is obviously a really great workout for your left hand, and we're moving down on the neck so that we play around this area as well, which is really important. So that's the basic idea behind that one, this kind of really cool fluid scale run. And as you could see, I'm not really using my pick with that one. I was only picking once, the first note with a downstroke, and the rest I'll just hammer-ons and pull-offs, and I'm once again using my middle finger. Maybe you can see it a bit better when I play like this. So a lot of action with the middle finger going on right here. When you work on this one, make sure to start out very slow and to focus on every single note. I basically started working on my left hand technique, like really working on my left hand technique and on legato and hammer-ons and pull-offs last year. So I know that it's really tedious at the beginning not to hit all the other strings with your pull-off motion, for example, and not just kind of losing notes or missing notes in there because you can't make them sound yet. So just a couple of quick tips when it comes to this playing style before we move on. It's very beneficial to place your thumb behind your fingers, behind the middle finger actually, like that, to get the most amount of support for your hammer-ons and pull-offs. You want to make sure to have that nice kind of snapping motion, and that only works when you're not playing like this with the flat fingers that we discussed quite often on the channel already. And please make sure to practice this to a metronome, because timing is probably the most difficult aspect of all of this. Because if you're like me, you're used to playing in time with alternate picking and with your right hand kind of dictating the note spacing and all of that. And right here, your left hand is doing all of the work, or your fretting hand. Let's do something different once again for lick number 5. This one is focused on the alternate picking approach. And to add something new to the table with this lick, we're also including some chromatic notes in there. So for the following lick, I'm essentially visualizing the D minor scale, but I'm filling up those holes within the scale with chromatic notes. This easy trick can spice up your guitar solos and improvise takes quite a lot. Let's check it out in detail. So now we are working in the key of D minor, and I'm once again working with this very, very common scale shape. But to make it a bit more interesting and not to just play the scale up and down, I'm filling up those holes within those 3-note per string scale positions with chromatic notes, so with completely wrong notes that have nothing to do with the D minor scale. So this one is definitely for you in case you want to work on your alternate picking skills. It's a great workout for your practice routine as well, aside from being a pretty cool lick and idea. And maybe I can inspire you to work with more chromatic notes in your licks. It's kind of uncommon in rock and metal music, and I would love to hear that more often. We're sadly running out of time for today's episode, so let's check out lick number 5 performed at the original tempo once again before we move to the final lick. Let's do something new once again for the final lick. This time we're working with tapping, and I'm also including some chromatic notes once again to make this one more interesting. So for this one I'm combining a bunch of topics that we talked about today, and I'm adding something new in the form of tapping. I'm working with hammer-ons and pull-offs. I'm working with chromatic notes, and the new element, as I said, is tapping right here, A on the 17th fret on the high E string. So that's the main idea of this lick, and it sounds pretty crazy. When I'm moving up to the tapped note, I'm once again playing that chromatic line based around those notes of the E minor scale, E, F sharp and G, but I'm adding F on the 13th fret of the high E string right here. And then of course after tapping, I move my way down this chromatic phrase once again. So once you get all the notes to ring in there, you end up with a really crazy and climactic lick for your solos. Make sure to tag me on Instagram or on any other social media platform in case you're posting your own takes. That would be really awesome. As always, I would love to check out your versions of those licks as well. Welcome back, Shred Gang. Since almost all of you requested it on Patreon this month, we work on some amazing sounding shred licks together today. And great news, they all sound and look quite advanced, but they are actually not that hard. Here's how this works. Who knows, maybe this will become Guitar YouTube's favorite show. So first I will play a fast and slow version of each lick for you, followed by a quick tutorial and explanation concerning the techniques you will use. And there's also a twist with every single one. A small but very important detail that makes each lick sound much harder than it actually is. It's really almost like revealing a magic trick in some cases. After watching today's video until the end so that you get to know each lick, you should head over to patreon.com/Bernd, because there you will find video play-alongs, tabs, guitar profiles and backing tracks for each lick, and also 5 additional killer exclusive licks with the complete shred lick package. That way you will never run out of awesome shred ideas again. Let's do this. This is a pretty cool and unique sounding lick, and here's why you should learn it. So first of all, the main focus with this lick is on the note repetitions in there. So right at the beginning I'm playing A on the 17th fret on the high E string, E on the 12th fret on the high E string, and E once again right here on the 17th fret on the B string. This is because I'm stretching pretty far for the entire lick and I end up with a lot of note repetitions, and that sounds pretty crazy. I'm actually playing the E minor pentatonic scale, but instead of the classic 2-note per string approach that you're probably familiar with, I'm extending it for a 3-note per string approach. So this is the popular stretch pentatonic shape. So the exact same notes, but I'm playing 3 notes per string instead of 2 notes per string. And here's the little extra trick and secret for you. I'm not playing the note in the middle, and that's why I'm ending up with this crazy shape right here. And one more trick for better and more creative licks, I'm also working with odd note grouping right here. So I'm playing groups of 5 instead of your usual groups of 2 or 4. So I'm playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's obviously more interesting than just playing it up or down. And why is this actually easier than it looks? First of all, the shape is really easy to memorize. It's almost the same for every single string, with the exception of the G string where I need my ring finger. But for all the other strings it's exactly the same. And the second reason why it's easier than it looks and sounds is because I can work with economy picking right here. Maybe you've seen it already. Instead of alternate picking everything, I'm playing down, up, down, up, down, down. So there's a small sweeping motion in there, and this pattern is simply repeated throughout the entire lick. And here's why you should learn this one. So first of all, this is the really cool and kind of dissonant sound of the whole tone scale. Sounds pretty crazy. And this one is really good for your hammer-ons and pull-offs. As you could see, I'm not really playing a lot of picking strokes with this lick. So you get this really cool fluid and kind of liquid sound with that one. If hammer-ons and pull-offs at high speeds are still problematic for you, I made a full legato online course for Patreon recently. Make sure to check that one out. But the coolest thing right here is the sound of the whole tone scale, which you probably don't use too much. And it's actually quite simple. Here's how the A whole tone scale looks like when I just play it on one string. So as the name suggests, really just whole tones. So once again, the scale is really easy to memorize. And once you start thinking like this across all strings, you get this really easy to memorize fingering. So once again, a really easy but extremely cool sounding scale shape you should definitely memorize. But I know what you're probably thinking. This lick looks pretty hard. What's actually easy about it? Well, first of all, you're really just moving the exact same fingering. So index finger, middle finger and pinky finger, in my case, to different locations on different strings. So it's the exact same pattern all the time. And since you're not picking every single note, you don't have to worry about hand synchronization or mastering those string transitions with fast alternate picking. You can really just focus on your timing with your fretting hand and making all of those notes audible with your hammer-ons and pull-offs. You can just train the basic pattern on one string. And then as soon as you get a feeling for it, you just spread it all across the fretboard with the exact same fingering and get this awesome sounding but actually quite simple lick. Just a quick mission update before we continue with the shredding. As you know, we're trying to get guitar to the top of the YouTube charts in Austria. Right now we're number 90 and we have to overtake a sports channel named Elias Schwärzler. I'm sure that's a great channel, but we want to push guitar to the top, of course. So let's do this together. Make sure to shred over that subscribe button right now. Let's show the world that the guitar is still relevant. Pretty cool sound, but why? First of all, this one is based on E diminished arpeggios. So this kind of cool sound. But instead of playing just one arpeggio shape up and down, like we all do way too much, you're interestingly switching between different shapes with slides. And I know it looks crazy at first, but once again, it's much easier than it looks and sounds. The first reason for that is the symmetry of those diminished arpeggios. For this lick, you really just have to memorize one easy shape. You can just move this one up or down in minor thirds, so just 3 frets down or 3 frets up to get the next diminished arpeggio. So when I'm moving down with this lick, I'm just taking this shape, then I'm moving it here, and then right here. And then I'm just connecting those shapes interestingly with slides, but I'm really just seeing this one shape that I'm moving in minor thirds across the neck. And here's a really cool sweep picking trick for the first lick. That is a really cool pattern. And to escape the dead zone between the strings that we don't want to touch to avoid unwanted noise, I'm just working with upstrokes right here. That makes it really easy for me to play this pattern, so I'm just playing upstrokes right here. Okay, so this one is a bit harder already. It's for all the alternate picking lovers out there. So this is the perfect lick if you want to work more in this technique. You're essentially moving through 3 A minor scale positions, and it's a continuous pattern of downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, and so on. The first thing that's a bit tricky is that you're skipping the A string, so you're just playing on the E and D string, so not the usual A minor scale position. you're skipping the A string right here. Then you continue with 16th note triplets and have this kind of cycling pattern. And then you switch to 16th notes for this pattern. So the cool thing is that you're switching between 16th note triplets and 16th notes. That makes this one really, really interesting. And then you're just moving it up to the next position, the exact same pattern. So why is this one actually much easier than it looks? The coolest thing about this lick is the chunking method. So you have different chunks, meaning patterns that are repeated constantly in different scale positions. So once you master those 3 parts and patterns in one position, you can just move them all across the neck through the entire scale. So it doesn't feel like learning one extremely long lick. You're just learning chunk by chunk or part by part, and then you simply start moving those parts through the scale of your choice. And another reason why this is so awesome is that you can apply those chunks and patterns to any kind of scale from now on, as soon as you have them in your muscle memory. Harmonic minor, for example. This one is pretty cool. Maybe you recognize the sound. It's actually inspired by one of my songs, Monolith. That one is from my instrumental shred record, Elevation, so make sure to check it out if you're into all this kind of crazy stuff. The reason why I recommend to learn this is because you're fusing arpeggios with the modes right here. So I'm essentially thinking an A major arpeggio, but instead of just playing A, the root, C sharp, the major third, and E, the perfect fifth, I'm also adding the characteristic Lydian interval in there, so the sharp 4. D sharp in our case, so I get this really, really cool sound. So when you start combining arpeggios with really interesting scale notes and other intervals, you will get much more interesting results, and this is a great starting point to explore this way of thinking. So the reason why it looks and sounds pretty hard, but it's actually not that hard to play. So I know this one is based on sweep picking, a very challenging technique, but it's actually not as hard as it looks and sounds, mainly because the shape is really small and you're really just working with 3 strings, so the top 3 strings. Usually when you think about sweep picking, you have these big shapes in mind, also with finger rolling and barring. So it's really not that bad. With our example, you really just need to spend a bit of practice time to learn the picking pattern, the sweep picking pattern for those top 3 strings right here. It comes relatively fast. And then, as always, you can apply it to any kind of shape from now on, and you will immediately sound like a sweep picking professional with this small trick. Today we check out 10 awesome shred guitar licks that you can use for your own music or to work on some cool techniques like alternate picking, sweep picking, tapping and more. As always, you can find the detailed PDF tabs and guitar profiles for these licks on patreon.com/Bernd. Let the shredding begin! And we're back in the home studio again for the outro of this video. I really hope that you enjoyed checking out these 10 cool shred licks together with me in this video. As always, you can download the detailed tabs and guitar profiles for all of those licks on patreon.com/Bernd, and I also made sure to add my suggested down and upstroke placements in those files. So make sure to join us today, and I will hopefully see you again in the next video. All the best and have a lot of fun practicing until then.